Walter Johnson stood in the courtroom, mop still in hand, as silence fell. "I will defend him," he announced, his weathered black hands trembling. Marcus Reed, the abandoned billionaire, looked up in disbelief as the courthouse janitor walked forward. Neither man knew this moment would uncover America's darkest conspiracy. Before we dive into this incredible story of justice and courage, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you believe everyone deserves a fair chance at justice, regardless of their background, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about everyday heroes standing up against discrimination. Now let's see what happens when a forgotten legal genius decides to fight the system that once destroyed him. The tension in courtroom 302 of the Federal District Court in Manhattan was palpable as Marcus Reed sat alone at the defense table. Just 42 years old, with piercing blue eyes that had graced countless magazine covers, the tech billionaire founder of Quantum Core Technologies now faced serious fraud charges that threatened to destroy his $16 billion empire. The nightmare had begun 2 months earlier when accusations surfaced, claiming he had stolen the core technology behind his revolutionary quantum computing breakthrough. But today, something unprecedented had happened. In the middle of what the media called the trial of the decade, his entire legal team, 6 attorneys from Preston Holloway and Schmidt billing $6,000 per hour, had simply not shown up. No explanation, no phone call, nothing. "Your Honor," the prosecuting attorney Catherine Williams said with poorly concealed satisfaction, "it appears the defense has abandoned their client. We move for a default judgment." Judge Harriet Coleman, a stern woman with 30 years on the bench, peered down at Marcus over her reading glasses. "Mr. Reed, where is your legal representation?" Marcus stood, his normally confident posture diminished. "I don't know, Your Honor. They were here yesterday. I've been calling their office all morning but haven't received any response." The judge frowned. "This is highly irregular. However, without counsel, I have no choice but to. I will defend him." The voice came from the back of the courtroom, deep and resonant, despite its age. Every head turned to see Walter Gibson, the 65-year-old black courthouse janitor, still holding his mop, standing tall, despite decades of being overlooked. Walter made his way down the center aisle, ignoring the murmurs and snickers. His work uniform, navy blue pants and a light blue button-up shirt with "maintenance" embroidered on the pocket, stood in stark contrast to the expensive suits surrounding him. "Your Honor," he said, reaching the barrier separating spectators from the proceedings, "I would like to represent Mr. Reed." Catherine Williams let out a short, derisive laugh. "Your Honor, this is absurd. The janitor wants to play lawyer." Walter's eyes hardened, but his voice remained steady. "I'm not playing Ms. Williams. I was a member of the New York bar for 15 years before circumstances changed." He reached into his wallet and produced a worn bar card. "My license is still valid. I've kept up with my continuing education requirements all these years just in case." The courtroom erupted in whispers as Judge Coleman examined the card. "Mr. Gibson, while technically your credentials appear to be in order, you haven't practiced law in 30 years? 28 years, Your Honor," Walter corrected respectfully. "And with all due respect, this man deserves representation. The law is clear on that point." Judge Coleman's expression betrayed her skepticism. "Mr. Reed, do you wish to have Mr. Gibson represent you in this matter?" All eyes turned to Marcus, whose fortune had bought him the finest of everything his entire life. Now he was being offered the services of a courthouse janitor. Marcus studied Walter's face, the dignified gray at his temples, the intelligence behind his eyes, and most importantly, the determination in his jaw. "Yes, Your Honor, I accept Mr. Gibson as my attorney." The judge sighed, making little effort to hide her disapproval. "Very well, Mr. Gibson. You have 15 minutes to confer with your client before we proceed." As Walter moved to the defense table, a security guard stepped forward, blocking his path. "Sir, only attorneys are allowed beyond this point," he said, despite having just heard the judge's ruling. Walter displayed his bar card again. "I am an attorney." The guard looked to the judge, who nodded reluctantly, and he stepped aside with visible reluctance. As Walter sat beside Marcus, he leaned in close. "Something isn't right about any of this," he whispered. "Your lawyers didn't just abandon you. This feels orchestrated." Marcus looked surprised. "What makes you say that?" "In 20 years of cleaning these courtrooms, I've seen how cases like yours unfold. This one has felt wrong from the beginning." When court reconvened, Catherine Williams approached the bench. "Your Honor?" While we respect Mr. Reed's right to counsel, we have concerns about Mr. Gibson's qualifications to handle such a complex case. Walter stood immediately. Your Honor, my qualifications are not at issue here. The law doesn't require an attorney to have a certain number of billable hours or prestigious clients to provide adequate representation. Judge Coleman's mouth tightened. Mr. Gibson, you'll find that in my courtroom attorneys comport themselves with proper decorum, the kind one learns at accredited law schools and reputable firms. The racial coding in her comment was subtle but unmistakable. When court adjourned for the day, the prosecution team gathered their expensive leather briefcases, several attorneys openly smirking at Walter's outdated suit, hastily retrieved from his locker, with its wide lapels and slightly frayed cuffs. Marcus noticed their expressions, and for the first time felt a flicker of shame at the casual elitism he had participated in his entire life. Thank you, he said quietly to Walter as they left the courtroom. But why would you help me? You don't even know me. Walter's response was simple. Because everyone deserves a fair defense, Mr. Reed, even billionaires. The following morning, Walter arrived at the imposing gates of Marcus Reed's Westchester estate, a 20-acre property with a 14,000-square-foot main house. I'm here to see Mr. Reed, Walter informed the security guard at the gate. The guard looked at Walter's 15-year-old Toyota Corolla with undisguised suspicion. And you are? Walter Gibson, his attorney. The guard snorted. Yeah, right. Mr. Reed's attorneys drive Mercedes, not whatever this is. Walter maintained his composure. Call Mr. Reed, please. After a tense phone conversation, the guard reluctantly opened the gate, muttering something under his breath as Walter drove through. At the main house, another security officer stopped Walter at the door, demanding identification and making him wait outside in the chilly morning air for nearly 15 minutes before finally allowing him entry. Marcus greeted Walter in a spacious home office, lined with awards and technological patents. Sorry about security, he said, though his tone suggested this was a normal occurrence hardly worth mentioning. Coffee? Walter declined. We need to get to work. I've only got today before I need to be back at the courthouse for my shift. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're still working as a janitor while defending me. I can't afford not to, Walter replied simply. Now I need to see every document related to your case. As they reviewed the case files, Marcus initially displayed subtle condescension, explaining basic legal concepts to Walter as if he might have forgotten them. I understand how discovery works, Mr. Reed, Walter finally said, his patience wearing thin. I need you to treat me like your attorney, not your employee. Something in Walter's tone made Marcus pause and really look at the man before him. Behind the janitor's uniform was a legal mind that remained razor-sharp. You're right, Marcus admitted. I apologize. As they worked through the mountain of documents, Walter noticed something odd. These discovery responses are incomplete. Your previous attorneys should have objected to this. He pulled out several key technical documents. And these specifications about your quantum processing technology, they're redacted in critical sections. Did your attorneys do this? Marcus leaned forward, suddenly alert. No, those should be complete. That's the evidence that proves I developed the technology independently. Walter's eyes narrowed. Someone deliberately withheld crucial evidence. Your own attorneys were sabotaging your case. As they continued working, Walter grew quiet, lost in thought. What is it? Marcus asked. Walter hesitated before speaking. Your situation reminds me of something from my past. I was a rising star at Johnson Williams & Brown, first black attorney they ever made partner. His eyes took on a distant look. Then I took on a racial discrimination case against Atlantic Energy Corporation, major client of several board members. Evidence started disappearing. Witnesses changed testimonies. Then suddenly, I was accused of evidence tampering. The bitterness in Walter's voice was palpable. I was disbarred for 6 years before I could prove my innocence and get reinstated. By then, no firm would touch me. The courthouse job was all I could get. Marcus absorbed this information silently. Walter moved to the window, casually adjusting the blinds. There's a black SUV across the street. Been there since I arrived. Marcus joined him at the window. Security. Not yours. They're watching this house. Walter turned to face Marcus. Tell me about your technology, the real story. Marcus hesitated, then walked to a wall safe hidden behind a painting. He extracted a thin file. Quantum core isn't just another computing advance. It's an entirely new paradigm. He spread out technical diagrams. We've created stable quantum processors that operate at room temperature. Do you understand what that means? Walter shook his head. It means unlimited computing power with minimal energy consumption. It makes current technology obsolete overnight, and it threatens multiple trillion-dollar industries. Traditional computing energy, telecommunications, military defense systems. Walter whistled softly. That would certainly give powerful people motive to see you fail. As they continued working, Marcus's personal assistant, Victoria Hayes, entered without knocking. Tall, efficient, and impeccably dressed, she barely acknowledged Walter's presence. Marcus, the board is requesting an emergency meeting about the trial. Her eyes flicked dismissively over Walter. They're concerned about your unusual choice of representation. Tell them I'm busy preparing my defense, Marcus replied. Victoria lingered. Are you sure this is wise? Perhaps we should consider settlement options. We could still salvage something from... That won't be necessary, Walter interjected. Victoria's expression cooled further. I don't believe I was addressing you, Mr. Gibson. Walter Gibson, attorney at law. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course. How inspiring. After she left, Walter said quietly, How long has she worked for you? 5 years. She's extremely loyal. Why? Walter didn't answer directly. Who has access to your company files? The executive team, Victoria, a few senior engineers. Later, as Marcus took a phone call, Walter noticed a flash drive left carelessly on Victoria's desk in the adjoining office. A quick check revealed company files being systematically copied. Before he could investigate further, the prosecution delivered a courier package. Supplemental evidence. They planned to introduce the next day. Inside were emails allegedly showing Marcus discussing stealing the disputed technology 2 years earlier. These are forgeries, Marcus said, his face pale. I never wrote these. Walter studied the emails closely. They're well done, but there are inconsistencies. The question is, how did they get access to your email format and signature block? He looked up at Marcus. Someone very close to you is helping them. And they're not just trying to win a lawsuit, they want to destroy you completely. The next morning, Walter entered the courtroom to a buzz of whispers and barely concealed smirks. The story of the janitor lawyer had spread overnight, with several legal blogs running mocking headlines like, From Mop to Motion, Janitor Represents Billionaire, and Cleaning Up Justice Maintenance Man's Legal Career Resurrected. Walter ignored the spectators, focusing instead on organizing his notes at the defense table. The prosecution team, led by Catherine Williams, entered with an air of absolute confidence, nodding to colleagues and court officers like conquering heroes, arriving for an easy victory. All rise, called the bailiff as Judge Coleman entered. After the formalities, Catherine Williams rose smoothly. Your Honor, the prosecution calls James Harrington Chief Technology Officer at Nexus Innovations. Harrington, a polished executive in his 50s, took the stand with practiced ease. After establishing his credentials, Williams led him through damning testimony about attending a technology conference where Marcus had allegedly photographed Nexus prototypes and stolen their design concepts. When Williams finished her direct examination, she turned to Walter with a patronizing smile. Your witness, Mr. Gibson. Walter approached the podium and immediately struggled with the electronic evidence system. The court clerk made no move to assist him as the prosecution team exchanged amused glances. Technical difficulties, Mr. Gibson, Judge Coleman asked with thinly veiled impatience. Perhaps in a case involving advanced technology, we need counsel who can at least operate a basic computer system. The gallery tittered with laughter. Walter straightened his shoulders. My apologies, Your Honor. In my day, we relied more on substance than presentation. He abandoned the technology and approached the witness directly. Mr. Harrington, you testified that you saw Mr. Reed photographing your prototypes at the Geneva Tech Summit, correct? Yes, that's right. What date was this summit? It's June 12th through 14th, 2022. Walter handed a document to the clerk. I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit 1 into evidence. These are Mr. Reed's passport stamps and hotel receipts showing he was in Tokyo from June 10th through June 16th of that year, attending a different conference. The witness shifted uncomfortably. I might have the dates wrong, but I definitely saw him. Your Honor, Walter interrupted. I move to strike the witness's entire testimony as perjury. Mr. Reed has never attended the Geneva Tech Summit in any year, as travel records can confirm. Objection, Williams shouted. The witness may have confused the specific conference, but the substance of his testimony goes to his credibility, Walter completed firmly. If he's mistaken about where he supposedly witnessed this critical event, what else is he mistaken about? Judge Coleman frowned. I'll allow the witness to clarify. Harrington grew flustered under Walter's continued questioning, eventually admitting he had never personally seen Marcus photograph anything, but had heard from reliable sources that it had happened. Walter pressed further. These reliable sources, would that be Catherine Williams and her team who coached you on this testimony? Objection. Williams was on her feet. That's outrageous and offensive. Sustained, Judge Coleman said sharply. Mr. Gibson, that's enough. The jury will disregard that last question. But Walter had made his point. The jury was now openly studying Harrington with skepticism. As Walter continued his cross-examination, exposing more contradictions, his mind flashed back to his early days as an attorney. He remembered a similar case where he'd challenged testimony from a corporate executive only to have the judge tell him during a sidebar, "Young man, people like you don't question people like him in my courtroom. Know your place." The memory strengthened his resolve as he systematically dismantled Harrington's testimony. By the time Walter finished, the prosecution's first witness had been thoroughly discredited. During the lunch recess, Walter stepped outside for fresh air, only to be approached by two men in dark suits. "Mr. Gibson," the taller one said. "A word." They guided him to a quiet corner. "You're making a mistake with this case." "Is that a threat?" Walter asked calmly. "Call it friendly advice. A man your age should be thinking about retirement, not making powerful enemies." Walter stood his ground. "I've faced worse than vague threats from men in cheap suits." The shorter man stepped closer. "Have you checked on your apartment lately? Would be a shame if something happened to it." They walked away, leaving Walter unsettled but more determined than ever. That evening, Walter found his small apartment in Queens had been ransacked. Nothing valuable had been taken. He owned little of worth, but his legal notes were scattered everywhere, and old case files he'd kept from his attorney days had been gone through methodically. Back at Marcus's estate, Walter shared what had happened. "They're trying to intimidate you," Marcus said, genuinely concerned. "You should stay here. I have plenty of room." Walter shook his head. "That would look improper, but thank you." As they worked into the night, Marcus gradually revealed more about himself, his difficult childhood, his struggles to be taken seriously in the tech world, his eventual success. In turn, Walter shared stories of the discrimination he'd faced throughout his legal career and life. "I never realized," Marcus said at one point, "how different your experience of America has been from mine." "Most people don't," Walter replied simply. The following morning, several news outlets ran stories about Walter Most, with racist undertones, despite their superficially positive framing. "From janitor to Jedi courthouse cleaner's legal longshot," read one headline. Another questioned, "Diversity hire or legal fire billionaire's bizarre attorney choice." Walter set the newspapers aside. "They're trying to distract us and undermine your case through me. Let's focus on what matters." But as they reviewed more documents, Walter discovered something disturbing. Someone had accessed records of his old legal cases, particularly the discrimination suit that had ended his career. "They're using my past against us," he said grimly. "They know exactly who I am and why I'm dangerous to them." Do you think Walter is right to be concerned about his past being used against him? Comment number 1. If you believe his history, fighting discrimination will ultimately be his strength. Or number 2. If you think it makes him too vulnerable to his powerful enemies. And if you're inspired by Walter standing up against intimidation, despite the personal cost, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of courage against overwhelming odds. Now, as Walter and Marcus prepare to return to court, will they discover who's been accessing these old records, and what will they find when they dig deeper into the forces aligned against them? After another tense day in court, Walter decided it was time to seek help from someone who knew the legal landscape from the old days. He drove his aging Toyota to a quiet neighborhood in Brooklyn, pulling up to a modest brownstone with carefully tended flowers out front. James Washington, now 87 years old, had once been one of the most respected civil rights attorneys in New York. More importantly, he had been Walter's mentor. "Walter Gibson," the elderly man said as he opened the door, his voice still strong despite his frail appearance. "Been watching you on the news. About time you got back in the game. Inside, surrounded by walls of legal books and framed photographs with historical civil rights figures, James listened intently as Walter explained the Reed case. When Walter finished, James removed his glasses slowly. This isn't just about patent infringement. What you're describing connects to something much bigger. He shuffled to a filing cabinet and extracted a dust-covered folder. 30 years ago, I was working on a case involving Atlantic Energy Corporation. Yes, the same one that destroyed your career. I discovered evidence of a consortium called the Foundation. A group of corporations and government officials working together to suppress technological innovations that threatened their industries. Walter leaned forward. That sounds like conspiracy theory territory, James. I thought so too, until 3 of my witnesses died in accidents. My office was firebombed, and a judge with no connection to the case called me personally to warn me off. He passed the folder to Walter. I was too old to fight then, but the names in that file, many are connected to the companies now coming after your client. Walter opened the folder, recognizing several names that appeared in Marcus's case documents. Why would they reveal themselves over Reed's technology? Because what you described, quantum computing at room temperature, it's the Holy Grail. It would revolutionize everything from energy to transportation to military applications. The people who control current technologies stand to lose trillions. The next morning, Walter reached out to another figure from his past. Amara Lewis had been a young paralegal at his firm before the scandal. Now she ran her own digital forensics company. They met at a small coffee shop far from the courthouse. Walter Gibson, she said, embracing him warmly. When I saw you on TV, I couldn't believe it. The ultimate comeback story. Despite being in her 50s now, Amara's sharp intelligence remained unchanged. This isn't about redemption, Amara. It's about justice. Walter slid a flash drive across the table. These are the technical specifications for Reed's quantum processor. I need to understand why they're so revolutionary that people would risk everything to steal them. Amara's eyes widened as she reviewed the files on her laptop. This is incredible. Reed has solved the decoherence problem, keeping quantum bits stable at normal temperatures. Do you understand what this means? Not entirely, Walter admitted. It means unlimited computing power with minimal energy consumption. Military encryption rendered obsolete. AI capabilities beyond anything we've imagined. And most importantly, the entire energy sector transformed overnight. No more dependence on oil, gas, or even current green technologies. She looked up at Walter. If this works as described, it's worth not billions but trillions. And it would make a lot of very powerful technologies, and the people who control them, obsolete. As Walter's involvement in the case gained publicity, the racial harassment intensified. Walking to the courthouse, he encountered spray-painted slurs on the sidewalk outside. Court officers, randomly, selected him for additional security screening every morning. Anonymous callers left threatening messages laced with racial epithets at his apartment building. Yet Walter remained focused on the case, refusing to be baited into a reaction that could be used against him and Marcus. The trial was entering its 3rd week when Marcus's brother Thomas unexpectedly appeared at the courthouse. Tall, polished, and looking remarkably like Marcus, except for his colder eyes. Walter Gibson, he said, extending his hand after approaching Walter in the hallway. My brother speaks highly of you. I've come to offer my support. Walter accepted the handshake while noting Thomas's expensive watch and the subtle glance he exchanged with Catherine Williams as they passed in the corridor. Later, Walter observed Thomas entering a coffee shop across from the courthouse, the same one where Catherine Williams and her team regularly strategized. Though Thomas sat at a different table, Walter didn't miss the note surreptitiously passed between them. That evening, Walter received an unexpected visitor at his temporary office in Marcus's guest house. A well-dressed man introduced himself as representing concerned parties. Mr. Gibson, my clients are impressed by your legal acumen. They believe this case has gone on long enough and are prepared to offer you $2 million to guide Mr. Reed toward a reasonable settlement. Walter didn't even look up from his papers. The answer is no. And if you or your clients approach me with a bribe again, I'll add witness tampering to the growing list of crimes I'm uncovering. The man left without another word, but his visit confirmed Walter's suspicions. Powerful people were getting nervous. With Amara's help, Walter began understanding the technical aspects of the case better. She traced the electronic trail of Marcus's former legal team and discovered large unexplained deposits in offshore accounts belonging to the lead attorney, followed by evidence of blackmail involving manufactured misconduct allegations. They didn't abandon you voluntarily, Walter told Marcus. They were forced out and then silenced. As Walter's profile rose with each day in court, it caught the attention of someone unexpected, his daughter Maya, now 32 years old. Their relationship had been strained for years, partly due to Walter's single-minded focus on clearing his name after his disbarment. She called him out of the blue. "Dad, I saw you on the news. Are you really defending Marcus Reed?" The sound of her voice after so long brought Walter to a standstill. "Maya, yes I am." "Why, after everything the system did to you?" Walter chose his words carefully. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because this case is connected to what happened to me all those years ago." A long pause followed. "Be careful, Dad, please." Before Walter could respond further, she had hung up. The prosecution's case took an unexpected turn when they announced a surprise witness. Dr. Leonard Chen, a former Quantum Core employee who claimed Marcus had stolen the technology from him. As Chen took the stand, Walter studied him carefully, noting his nervous mannerisms and the way he avoided looking directly at Marcus. "Dr. Chen," Catherine Williams began, "please tell the court about your role in developing the quantum processing technology that Mr. Reed has claimed as his own invention." Chen launched into a technically dense explanation that seemed designed to confuse the jury while establishing his credentials. Walter prepared his notes for cross-examination, knowing this witness could either destroy their case or provide the opening he needed to expose the truth. "Dr. Chen." Walter began his cross-examination with deceptive gentleness. "You testified that you developed the core algorithms for quantum stability that form the heart of Mr. Reed's patent application. Is that correct?" "Yes, that's right," Chen replied, his confidence growing after surviving direct examination. "And when exactly did you create these algorithms?" "Between January and March of 2021 while working at Quantum Core." Walter nodded, approaching the witness stand. "That's interesting, because I have here your employment records showing you weren't hired until April 21, 2021. He slid the document to Chen. "Can you explain how you developed these algorithms before you even worked for the company?" Chen's face flushed. "I must have mixed up the dates. It was actually... And I also have the server logs showing the quantum stability algorithms were already complete and stored in the company's secure repository by March 15, 2021, more than a month before you started." Walter didn't wait for a response before continuing. "Dr. Chen, did Nexus Innovations pay you $300,000 to testify today?" The courtroom erupted as Catherine Williams shouted objections. After order was restored, Walter produced bank records showing a transfer to an offshore account in Chen's name. By the time Walter finished his cross-examination, Chen had admitted to lying under oath in exchange for money and promises of future employment. The jury watched in shock as the supposedly credible witness crumbled under Walter's methodical questioning. During the lunch recess, Marcus took Walter to a private room in the courthouse. "There's something I haven't told you, something I should have shared from the beginning." He extracted a small device from his pocket, no larger than a USB drive. "This is a prototype of what we call the Q-core. It's the heart of my invention." Marcus explained that his quantum processor wasn't just incrementally better than existing technology. It represented a fundamental breakthrough in sustainable energy production. This tiny device, once fully developed, could generate enough clean energy to power a small city using quantum fluctuations in a way that doesn't violate any laws of thermodynamics, but exploits loopholes we never knew existed. Walter finally understood the true stakes. This wouldn't just disrupt the tech industry, it would completely transform energy production worldwide. Oil, gas, coal, all potentially obsolete. Exactly. And there are trillion-dollar industries built on controlling those resources. Marcus's voice dropped lower. "The people coming after me aren't just competitors. They're fighting for survival." Armed with this knowledge, Walter began a meticulous search through the case documents looking for connections between Nexus Innovations and energy companies. With Amara's help, he uncovered a complex web of shell companies linking Nexus to Atlantic Energy Corporation, the same company that had destroyed Walter's career 30 years earlier, along with several other energy giants and defense contractors. Further digging revealed communications between these companies and government officials discussing the containment of disruptive energy technologies. The conspiracy James Washington had hinted at was real and far more extensive than Walter had imagined. Walter compiled this evidence and filed a motion to dismiss based on prosecutorial misconduct and conspiracy to commit fraud upon the court. Judge Coleman appeared visibly uncomfortable as she reviewed the motion in chambers. Mr. Gibson, these are extremely serious allegations against highly respected corporations and government officials. Yes, Your Honor, they are. And they're supported by documentary evidence. Walter slid another folder across the desk. Including evidence of significant deposits to an offshore account connected to Your Honor's husband 2 days before this case was assigned to your courtroom. The color drained from Judge Coleman's face. Are you threatening me, Mr. Gibson? No, Your Honor. I'm giving you an opportunity to do the right thing. These documents will be filed publicly tomorrow morning, unless you recuse yourself from this case immediately. The next morning, Judge Coleman announced her recusal, citing previously unknown conflicts of interest. The case was reassigned to Judge Raymond Carter, a younger man with a reputation for fairness and independence. As Walter and Marcus left the courthouse, Marcus received an urgent call from his home security team. His estate had been broken into, his home office ransacked, and his private server containing research notes and prototypes had been stolen. They're getting desperate, Walter observed. We must be getting close to something they don't want found. That evening, Walter met secretly with Victoria Hayes, not at Marcus's home, but at a public park where they couldn't be easily overheard. I know you've been copying files, Walter said without preamble. The question is why? Victoria's composure cracked slightly. You don't understand what you're involved in. Then explain it to me. She glanced around nervously before speaking. Thomas Reed approached me 6 months ago. He said Marcus had stolen his ideas for the quantum technology. He convinced me to help him gather evidence. And did you find any evidence supporting that claim? Victoria looked down. No. The more I looked, the more clear it became that Marcus developed everything himself. So why continue helping Thomas? Victoria's voice trembled slightly. Because by then, he had evidence of financial irregularities in my past that would have sent me to prison. He blackmailed me. But it wasn't just about the files. He wanted me to plant false evidence. Walter studied her carefully. Why tell me this now? Because yesterday Thomas met with some men I didn't recognize. I overheard them discussing permanent solutions if the legal approach failed. I think they're planning something dangerous. With Victoria's help, Walter discovered the full extent of Thomas's betrayal. He had been working with Nexus and their energy company partners from the beginning, motivated by both money and long-simmering resentment toward his more successful brother. Using this new information, Walter and Amara worked through the night compiling irrefutable evidence that the original charges against Marcus were completely fabricated, from perjured testimony to forged documents to manufactured evidence. The next morning in court, Walter presented his findings, methodically building an airtight case that the entire prosecution was based on fraud. Judge Carter listened intently, his expression growing increasingly troubled. Catherine Williams attempted to object repeatedly, but each objection was weaker than the last as the evidence mounted. Just as Walter was showing documentation of offshore payments to witnesses, a commotion erupted at the back of the courtroom. 2 men burst through the doors, one raising what appeared to be a weapon. Court security officers responded immediately, tackling the intruders, but not before a shot was fired, missing Marcus by inches and shattering a window behind the defense table. As order was restored and the would-be assassins were taken into custody, Walter noticed Judge Carter's shocked expression. This isn't just a patent case anymore, Walter said grimly. This is a conspiracy to commit murder to protect corporate interests. Walter woke to the shrill sound of his phone ringing at 3:15 in the morning. The voice on the other end belonged to his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. Walter, you need to come home right now. Your building is on fire. By the time Walter arrived, firefighters had contained the blaze, but the damage was extensive. The fire had started suspiciously close to his apartment, which was now completely destroyed. His few possessions, mementos from his legal career, family photographs, all gone. The fire chief approached as Walter stared at the smoldering ruins. Accelerant was used. Definitely arson. Any idea why someone would target your apartment? Walter knew exactly why, but merely shook his head. No idea. The attack on his home was just the beginning. The next day, Walter received a distraught call from Maya. Dad, my boss just called me into his office. They're letting me go. Budget cuts, they said. But he mentioned it might not be good optics to have an employee connected to your case. Maya worked at a marketing firm with ties to several energy companies. It's not a coincidence, is it? she asked, her voice a mixture of anger and fear. No, Walter admitted. I'm so sorry, Maya. He heard her take a deep breath on the other end of the line. Well, if they're coming after me too, I might as well help you. What can I do? Walter felt a complex mix of pride and guilt. Proud of his daughter's courage, guilty that his fight had become hers. The attacks continued to spread. Amara called Walter in a panic after her office was broken into and her computer systems hacked. They nearly wiped everything, she explained. But I had backups on an air-gapped system. We didn't lose the evidence, but it was close. Walter was running out of safe places to stay, so he reluctantly accepted Marcus's offer of protection and moved into the guest house on his estate. This new proximity led to some initially awkward cultural misunderstandings. During their first dinner together, Marcus casually mentioned that Walter was so articulate and different from what people might expect, clearly intending it as a compliment. Walter set down his fork. Different from what people might expect from a black janitor, you mean? Marcus had the grace to look embarrassed. You didn't mean it to sound racist, I know. But it did. And that's something you should think about. Rather than becoming defensive, Marcus asked questions and actually listened to Walter's experiences. About being followed in stores, about having to be twice as good, to be considered half as qualified, about teaching his daughter what to do if stopped by police. For perhaps the first time in his privileged life, Marcus began to understand the daily racism Walter had endured for 65 years. As the case gained national attention, the media narrative took an ugly turn. Conservative outlets portrayed Walter as a radical with a vendetta against successful white businessmen. Janitor lawyer's radical past exposed, read one headline accompanied by a deliberately unflattering photograph of Walter looking angry, his fist raised at a civil rights demonstration decades earlier. Another article questioned, is Gibson using Reed case to advance social justice agenda? Walter's previous legal career was picked apart with every loss magnified and every win minimized or attributed to others. The constant stress began taking a physical toll. Walter had always prided himself on his stamina, but now he found himself exhausted, occasionally short of breath. One evening as he reviewed documents, his vision blurred, and his left arm tingled ominously. Marcus found him slumped over the desk. Walter, are you okay? Walter straightened with effort. Just tired. I'm fine. Marcus wasn't convinced. When was your last physical? You've been working 20-hour days for weeks. I don't have time for doctors. The preliminary hearing on our counter-evidence is tomorrow. Despite Walter's protests, Marcus called his personal physician, who confirmed Walter's blood pressure was dangerously high. You need rest and medication, the doctor advised. Another few days like this, and you're looking at a stroke. Walter accepted the medication, but refused to rest. Too much is at stake, he insisted. In court, Walter began noticing subtle patterns in Judge Carter's rulings. While initially seeming fair, the judge consistently excluded key evidence favorable to the defense on technical grounds, while allowing the prosecution significant latitude. After a particularly frustrating day in court, Walter asked Amara to investigate Judge Carter's background. What she found confirmed Walter's suspicions. Before his appointment to the bench, Carter had worked for a law firm representing several energy companies currently connected to Nexus Innovations. More damning, his brother-in-law sat on the board of Atlantic Energy Corporation. He should have recused himself immediately, Walter said. This is clear judicial misconduct. The next day, Walter confronted Judge Carter in chambers presenting evidence of his undisclosed conflicts of interest. I'll give you the same choice I gave Judge Coleman, Walter said calmly. Recuse yourself voluntarily, or I file a judicial misconduct complaint with evidence of your deliberate failure to disclose these connections. Judge Carter's face hardened. You're making a dangerous enemy, Gibson. I've been collecting those my entire career, Your Honor. One more won't make much difference. That evening, as Walter returned to Marcus's estate, he found Maya waiting for him. She'd been monitoring social media discussions about the case and had discovered coordinated disinformation campaigns targeting both Walter and Marcus. They're trying to poison public opinion, she explained. Thousands of bot accounts spreading the same talking points, creating fake, ordinary people who claim to have had negative experiences with both of you. Walter looked at his daughter with newfound respect for her expertise. Can you counter it? Maya smiled grimly. Already started, but we need to get ahead of their narrative. You're fighting this in the courtroom, but they're fighting it in the court of public opinion too. Have you ever stood up for what's right when it cost you personally? Comment number 1, if you'd risk everything for justice like Walter. Or number 2, if you think the personal cost is too high. And if this story of perseverance against powerful enemies inspires you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of extraordinary courage. As Walter faces mounting personal attacks while his health deteriorates, will he find the strength to continue? And with judges being compromised and evidence being destroyed, can justice ever truly prevail against such powerful opposition? It's all connected, Walter said, spreading documents across the table where he, Amara, Maya, and Marcus had gathered. After Judge Carter's recusal, the case had been temporarily suspended pending reassignment. This gave them precious time to assemble the complete picture. Maya had created a digital visualization mapping the relationships between key players. Nexus Innovations is just the public face, Amara explained, pointing to her laptop screen. Behind them is this network of energy companies, Atlantic Energy, Global Petroleum, North Star Resources, along with defense contractors and technology firms. Walter traced the connections with his finger. And connecting them all is the Foundation, the same shadow organization James Washington discovered 30 years ago. The conspiracy was breathtaking. In its scope, an alliance of energy companies, corrupt officials, and corporate rivals had orchestrated the entire case to not only steal Marcus's technology, but discredit him so thoroughly that his patents would be invalidated. But Thomas is the key, Walter said, pointing to Marcus's brother's name in the center of several connections. He's been their inside man from the beginning. Marcus shook his head, still struggling to accept his brother's betrayal. Why would he do this? Money, for one thing, Maya said, pulling up bank records showing transfers of millions of dollars to offshore accounts in Thomas's name. But based on emails I've recovered, it's more than that. He's always resented living in your shadow. He told his contacts you stole his ideas for the original quantum core technology. Walter organized their evidence into a comprehensive presentation. We're not just fighting a patent case anymore. We're exposing a criminal conspiracy involving corporate espionage, attempted murder, obstruction of justice, and corruption of government officials. The next morning, they learned the case had been reassigned to Judge Sophia Washington, a respected jurist with 20 years on the bench. Walter recognized her name immediately. They had attended law school together, though they hadn't kept in touch. When court reconvened, Walter presented their evidence methodically, building an airtight case against not only Nexus Innovations, but the entire network of conspirators. Catherine Williams objected repeatedly, growing increasingly desperate as Walter connected each piece of evidence to the next. Your Honor, she finally said, these wild conspiracy theories have no place in a patent infringement case. Mr. Gibson is trying to distract from the simple facts. There's nothing simple about attempted murder, Ms. Williams. Walter interrupted, displaying photographs of the courtroom shooting and his burned apartment building. Or about judges being bribed to handle a case in a particular way. Or about billions in market capitalization moving between companies based on insider knowledge of this manufactured case. Judge Washington's expression grew increasingly grave as the evidence mounted. Mr. Gibson, these are extremely serious allegations that go far beyond my courtroom. Have you presented this evidence to federal authorities? Not yet, Your Honor. We had concerns about potential corruption within regulatory agencies. The conspiracy appears to reach into several federal departments. As if to validate these concerns, Walter received an urgent call that evening from James Washington. They're coming after me now, the elderly attorney said, his voice shaking. 2 men claiming to be federal agents tried to enter my home without a warrant. When I refused, they threatened to return with one. They're trying to find your evidence before you can present it publicly. Walter arranged immediate private security for his mentor and advised him to relocate temporarily. Meanwhile, Maya discovered that old cases from Walter's legal career were being systematically re-examined with particular focus on the discrimination case against Atlantic Energy that had ended his career. They're trying to discredit you, she told her father. But I found something interesting. The judge who oversaw your disbarment hearing later received a directorship at Atlantic Energy worth $2 million annually. Walter stared at the document Maya had uncovered. After all these years, proof that they set me up. As they prepared for the next court session, Walter received an unexpected call from Victoria Hayes. Thomas is panicking, she said in a hushed voice. I overheard him on the phone saying the janitor knows too much and that they need to accelerate the timetable. Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon. Walter thanked her for the warning just as Maya burst into the room with her laptop. Dad, I've been monitoring chatter about Marcus's stolen research. Nexus has engineers working around the clock to reverse engineer the Q-core technology. They're racing to file patents before we can prove their fraud. Marcus looked stricken. If they succeed, everything I've worked for is gone. Walter placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Not if we move faster than they do. The next morning, Walter implemented a daring strategy in court. He filed a motion for emergency injunctive relief, seeking to freeze all patent applications related to quantum processing technology, pending resolution of the criminal conspiracy charges. Judge Washington granted the motion, delivering their first significant victory. That afternoon, an unexpected development shifted the dynamics dramatically. Thomas Reed contacted Walter directly, requesting a private meeting. He says he wants to make a deal, Walter told the team. He's offering to testify against the other conspirators in exchange for immunity. Marcus shook his head. Marcus, you can't trust him. I don't, Walter assured him. But we can use this. He's turning on his co-conspirators because he sees them turning on him. Classic prisoner's dilemma. The meeting took place in a neutral location, under the watchful eyes of private security hired by Marcus. Thomas appeared nervous, constantly checking his phone. They're going to make me the scapegoat, he said without preamble. I have evidence implicating everyone. The CEOs of Atlantic Energy and Global Petroleum, 2 assistant attorneys general, even Catherine Williams. They promised me protection, but now they're cutting me loose. Walter listened impassively. Why should we help you after what you've done? Thomas's laugh was bitter. Because I can give you everything. Names, dates, recordings of meetings. I was smart enough to keep insurance. He slid a flash drive across the table. This has it all, including their plans to have Marcus killed if the legal approach failed. As Thomas provided his statement, Walter reflected on the irony. The brother who had betrayed Marcus out of jealousy was now their key to exposing the entire conspiracy. The evidence Thomas provided was damning, including video recordings of meetings where energy company CEOs explicitly discussed suppressing Marcus's technology to protect their market positions. The next day in court, the energy companies made a desperate move. They hired William Chambers, a legendary attorney known for salvaging seemingly impossible cases, to take over from Catherine Williams. Chambers, tall and imposing with a shock of white hair, entered the courtroom like a general taking command of a battlefield. His first move was requesting a gag order to prevent public discussion of the unproven conspiracy allegations. Judge Washington denied the request. The evidence presented thus far warrants full transparency, Mr. Chambers. Chambers then launched a blistering attack on Walter's credibility, subtly employing racial tactics designed to undermine him before the jury. Mr. Gibson, with all due respect to his unusual career path, lacks the expertise to properly evaluate complex technological evidence. His interpretations are colored by personal grievances against the very system that rightfully ended his legal career decades ago. Walter recognized the strategy immediately. Chambers was trying to trigger an emotional response that would reinforce stereotypes of the angry black man. Instead, Walter responded with calm precision, using his lifetime of experiencing racism to expose Chambers' tactics to the jury. Mr. Chambers is employing a technique I've encountered throughout my life, Walter explained directly to the jury. He's suggesting that my perspective as a black man who has experienced injustice somehow makes me less credible, rather than more informed about how powerful interests can abuse the legal system. The jury members nodded in understanding, several making notes. Chambers realized his approach had backfired. Before he could pivot to a new strategy, Maya burst into the courtroom and hurried to Walter's side. "We found it," she whispered urgently. "Video evidence of the entire conspiracy." The video Maya had discovered was devastating. Footage from a private meeting where representatives from energy companies, Nexus Innovations, and government officials explicitly discussed using the legal system to destroy Marcus Reed and steal his technology. As Walter prepared to present this final piece of evidence, the courtroom doors burst open. Armed men in tactical gear stormed in, shouting for everyone to get down. In the ensuing chaos, someone tried to grab the evidence from Walter's hands. The desperate attempt to stop the proceedings had begun. Courthouse security officers responded immediately to the armed intrusion, drawing their weapons as people screamed and dove for cover. Walter clutched the evidence flash drive, tightly shielding it with his body as he pulled Maya down behind the defense table. Judge Washington was evacuated through a side door as the standoff intensified. "Federal agents, everyone down!" shouted the leader of the tactical team. Walter noticed something odd. These men wore generic police vests without specific agency identification, and their tactics seemed uncoordinated. "They're not real federal agents," he whispered to Marcus. The confusion bought crucial moments until actual FBI agents who had been monitoring the case due to Walter's earlier communications with them arrived and took control of the situation. The imposters were disarmed and detained their leader, eventually identified as a private military contractor with connections to Atlantic Energy Corporation. When order was restored and court reconvened in a secured courtroom, the conspiracy had reached the highest levels of government. Evidence implicated the Attorney General himself, who had received millions in energy company stock options while directing his department to support the fraudulent case against Marcus. Walter received numerous death threats, some slipped under his hotel room door. Others called in to the courthouse. The judge ordered police protection, but Walter remained skeptical. "Some of these threats are coming from inside law enforcement," he told Marcus and Maya. "I don't know who we can trust anymore." Despite the danger, Walter refused to back down. As he prepared for the final phase of the trial, he met with the FBI agents, who had begun a parallel investigation into the conspiracy. "This goes beyond corporate espionage," the lead agent told him. "We're looking at RICO charges, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit murder, and possibly treason, given the national security implications of Reed's technology." Meanwhile, Marcus discovered that despite the injunction, his stolen research was being rapidly developed by Nexus and their partners. Engineers were working around the clock to recreate his breakthrough, hoping to patent it under their names before the case concluded. Thomas Reed's betrayal of his co-conspirators had sent shockwaves through their ranks. Several lower-level participants approached prosecutors seeking deals in exchange for testimony. But the core group of energy company CEOs hired the legendary William Chambers to salvage their defense. Chambers was known for his scorched earth tactics and his perfect record in high-stakes corporate cases. He had once famously stated, "I don't just win cases. I destroy the opposition so completely they never recover." In a dramatic development, the original prosecution team led by Catherine Williams faced disbarment proceedings and potential criminal charges for their role in the conspiracy. Williams offered to cooperate, revealing that the case against Marcus had been planned for over a year before charges were even filed. The energy companies were getting desperate. Atlantic Energy's stock had plummeted 40% since the conspiracy allegations became public. Global Petroleum faced a shareholder revolt. Government officials implicated in the scheme began resigning or taking leaves of absence. In court, Chambers launched his counteroffensive by bringing in his own technical experts, who claimed Marcus's technology couldn't possibly work as described. It was theoretical at best, fraudulent at worst. This entire case centers on technology that violates the basic laws of physics, Chambers argued smoothly. Mr. Reed has perpetrated a massive fraud on investors and the public by claiming impossible breakthroughs. Walter was ready for this attack. He called Amara Lewis to the stand as an expert witness. With her guidance, he methodically dismantled the defense's technical objections, explaining how Marcus's breakthrough worked within established physical laws, while exploiting previously undiscovered quantum effects. The battle of experts continued for days, becoming increasingly technical. Walter, despite his lack of scientific background, had spent countless hours with Amara learning the fundamentals of quantum physics to prepare for exactly this scenario. Chambers employed subtle racial tactics throughout the proceedings. He consistently referred to Walter as Mr. Gibson, while addressing other attorneys by their full names with honorifics. He expressed exaggerated surprise when Walter demonstrated technical knowledge. He positioned himself between Walter and the jury whenever possible, as if protecting them. Walter recognized every tactic from his years facing discrimination in courtrooms. Rather than ignore the behavior, he addressed it directly. "Your Honor, I notice a pattern in Mr. Chambers' behavior that I believe the court should be aware of." He then calmly cataloged the microaggressions, placing them in the context of techniques historically used to undermine black professionals. "I raise this not for personal reasons, but because these tactics are designed to trigger unconscious biases in the jury, which undermines the pursuit of justice." Judge Washington nodded. "The court has observed these patterns as well. Mr. Chambers, this stops now." Chambers appeared genuinely shocked at being called out so explicitly. His tactics had worked his entire career precisely because victims usually feared addressing them directly. As the final days of testimony approached, Maya made a breakthrough discovery. video evidence of the conspiracy members planning the entire scheme from its inception. The footage showed energy company CEOs explicitly discussing how to eliminate the Reed problem and make sure this technology never sees daylight. Walter prepared to present this devastating evidence as the culmination of their case. On the morning Walter was to present the video evidence, Marcus's security team discovered and neutralized a bomb planted in their car. The FBI increased security around the courthouse, conducting thorough sweeps before each session. When court convened, the gallery was packed with journalists, the hallways filled with camera crews. Walter rose to present their final evidence. Your Honor, what we are about to show conclusively proves the conspiracy we have alleged throughout these proceedings. As Walter connected the evidence laptop to the courtroom display system, the doors burst open. Armed men in tactical gear, this time actual federal agents, entered the courtroom. Everyone stay calm, announced the lead agent. We have a credible threat against this courtroom. Before Walter could react, shots were fired from somewhere in the gallery. People screamed and dove for cover as security returned fire. In the chaos, Walter saw a man lunging toward Marcus with what appeared to be a knife. Without hesitation, Walter threw himself into the attacker's path. The courtroom attack ended as quickly as it began. Federal agents neutralized the shooter while Walter grappled with Marcus's would-be attacker, sustaining a slash across his forearm before courthouse security officers subdued the man. As order was restored, it became clear the desperate attack had been a last-ditch effort by the conspirators to prevent the final evidence from being presented. When proceedings resumed in a heavily secured courtroom the following day, Walter stood before the jury with his arm bandaged, his voice steady despite the chaos of the previous day. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began. What we've witnessed goes far beyond a patent dispute. The violence, the corruption, the lengths to which powerful people have gone to suppress Mr. Reed's innovation. All of it points to a fundamental truth. This case is about power and who gets to decide the future. For the next 2 hours, Walter presented the complete conspiracy evidence chronologically, weaving together corporate documents, witness testimony, financial transfers, and finally the damning video recordings showing the energy company executives explicitly plotting to destroy Marcus and steal his technology. As Walter concluded, the courtroom fell silent. Even William Chambers made no objections, seemingly resigned to the overwhelming evidence. Your Honor, Walter said, turning to Judge Washington. The defense moves for immediate dismissal of all charges against Marcus Reed, and we request that the Department of Justice open criminal investigations into all parties implicated in this conspiracy. Judge Washington nodded. Given the extraordinary evidence presented, this court dismisses all charges against Mr. Reed with prejudice. I am referring this matter to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution of all involved parties. She paused, looking directly at Walter. Mr. Gibson, this court commends your extraordinary persistence in the face of overwhelming opposition and personal danger. You exemplify the highest ideals of our profession. 3 weeks later, the aftermath of what the media called the energy conspiracy case continued to reverberate throughout the country. The Attorney General resigned in disgrace. Indictments were issued against 27 executives from various energy companies and government officials. Nexus Innovations filed for bankruptcy as its stock collapsed. Atlantic Energy Corporation faced a class action lawsuit from shareholders. Marcus Reed was fully exonerated, his patents secured. But perhaps most significantly for Walter, the Judicial Review Board examined his disbarment case from 30 years ago and formally acknowledged it had been tainted by racial discrimination and corporate influence. The official record was amended to reflect that Walter had been wrongfully forced from the profession he loved. As Walter cleaned out his small office at the courthouse, turning in his maintenance uniform for the last time, colleagues who had barely acknowledged him for years now stopped to shake his hand or pat his back. The head of courthouse maintenance, who had been a fair but distant boss, stood awkwardly at Walter's locker. We're going to miss you around here, Walter. You always did good work. Walter smiled. Thank you, Bill. That means a lot. Later that day, Walter met Marcus at his estate. The billionaire had invited him to discuss future opportunities. In the same office where they had first begun working together, Marcus now proposed something unexpected. I want you to be Quantum Core's chief legal officer. Salary $5 million annually plus stock options. We're going to need the best legal mind available to navigate the patents and regulatory challenges ahead. Walter was momentarily speechless. After a lifetime of financial struggle, the offer was beyond generous. Finally, he shook his head. I appreciate the offer, Marcus, more than you know, but I have other plans. Name your price then. Whatever it takes. Walter smiled. It's not about money. These past months have reminded me why I became a lawyer in the first place. To fight for justice, especially for those who can't fight for themselves. He handed Marcus a business card freshly printed, Gibson Law, specializing in discrimination and civil rights cases. I'm reopening my practice. There are too many people out there facing the same discrimination I faced, without the resources to fight back. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding. Then let me help another way. I'd like to establish a foundation, the Walter Gibson Legal Justice Fund, to support your work and similar cases nationwide. $20 million initial endowment with annual contributions thereafter. This time, Walter accepted. That would make a tremendous difference. As they concluded their meeting, Maya arrived. Since the case ended, she had been working closely with her father to establish his new practice. The office space on Fifth Avenue is perfect, she told him excitedly. And we already have 3 potential clients calling for consultations. Walter looked at his daughter with pride. Their relationship, once strained, had been fully rebuilt through their shared battle for justice. Partners? He asked, extending his hand. Maya's smile was answer enough. The following Monday, Walter arrived at the courthouse again. Not as a janitor, but as an attorney representing a young black woman in a workplace discrimination case. As he passed through security, the same guards who had once barely acknowledged him now greeted him respectfully. Yet Walter made a point to stop and chat with the new maintenance staff, treating them with the dignity often denied to those in service positions. Though he had been vindicated and his professional status restored, Walter still worked part-time at the courthouse as a janitor. When Marcus questioned this decision, Walter explained simply, "It keeps me humble, and it reminds me that justice doesn't care about uniforms or titles, it cares about truth." The Walter Gibson Legal Justice Fund quickly grew beyond its initial scope, supporting dozens of discrimination cases nationwide and establishing legal clinics in underserved communities. Marcus and Walter, once connected by circumstance, became genuine friends and powerful allies in reforming a system that had failed them both in different ways. Marcus often remarked that losing his fortune would have been a small price to pay for the perspective he gained through their ordeal. On the 1-year anniversary of the case's conclusion, Walter received a letter from Judge Harriet Coleman, the first judge who had treated him with such dismissive contempt. She wrote to apologize, explaining that the case had forced her to confront her own biases and assumptions. She had since become an advocate for judicial diversity training. As Walter read her letter in his Fifth Avenue office, Maya brought in their newest client, a janitor from a corporate headquarters who had evidence of environmental violations being covered up by executives. Walter welcomed him warmly, remembering all too well what it felt like to be invisible to those in power. "Everyone deserves justice," Walter told him, regardless of their job title or the color of their skin. "Now, tell me your story, and let's get to work. What would you do if you were in Walter's position? Would you take the high-paying corporate job or start your own practice to help others facing discrimination? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story of perseverance and justice moved you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more incredible true stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And share this video with someone who needs a reminder that one person standing up for what's right can truly change the system. Thank you for watching. I will defend him. Remember that heroes don't always wear suits, and justice sometimes comes from the most unexpected places. Walter Gibson's journey reminds us that justice often requires extraordinary courage in the face of systemic oppression. His story teaches us that our worth isn't determined by titles or uniforms, but by our character and determination. The willingness to stand up against powerful interests, even at great personal cost, is what truly changes broken systems. Walter's decision to maintain his janitor position while rebuilding his legal career demonstrates profound humility and perspective qualities that made him not just a good lawyer, but a great one. Marcus's transformation shows how privilege can blind us to others' struggles until we experience injustice firsthand. The conspiracy Walter uncovered represents how entrenched powers will go to extreme lengths to maintain control, especially when faced with innovations that threaten their dominance. Most importantly, Walter's victory wasn't just personal vindication, but created a ripple effect that helped others facing similar discrimination, proving that one person's courageous stand can inspire systemic change. What moment in Walter's journey resonated with you most deeply? Was it his initial courage to stand up in court, his perseverance through mounting personal attacks, or his decision to help others after winning his own battle? Comment below and share your thoughts. If Walter's fight against discrimination and powerful interests inspired you, please hit that like button to help more people discover this story of courage and justice. Subscribe to hear more tales of everyday heroes standing up against racist systems and making real change in the world. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that they have the power to fight injustice no matter where they stand in society. Thank you for joining us for this powerful journey. May we all find Walter's courage when facing our own moments of truth.
Beat.